Welcome back. Last time we completed our discussion of Mir Damad's resolution of the debate between the theologians and philosophers over the creation of the world and time. And now we turn to Mulla Sadra's philosophical treatment of bodily resurrection and grand synthesis of all the currents of Islamic thought that we've discussed. Let us first highlight a few aspects of his life and teaching. He lived until the middle of the 17th century and was a contemporary of Descartes. Mulla Sadra is therefore not medieval. He was a man to whom God had given everything. His father was a governor of Shiraz who brought the best teachers to educate his son. Mulla Sadra loved God from a very early age and was very precocious, like Ibn Sina. Mulla Sadra didn't want to follow his father into political life and wanted to become a religious scholar. He studied in Shiraz until the age of 18, but outgrew his teachers. He then set out for Isfahan, the capital, to study with these great masters of Mir Damad, Baha'u'ddin al-Amili, and others, becoming their most famous student. In contrast to Mir Damad, Mulla Sadra wrote in an outwardly easy manner, not trying to hide meaning. One may feel one understands it without truly doing so, because the language is deceivingly simple. Mulla Sadra therefore exposed himself more to attacks from certain jurists than did Mir Damad. So he left Isfahan after a decade of having studied there. He set out for a little village between Qom and Isfahan in the mountains and withdrew from the world, spending the next 10 or 11 years in meditation and spiritual practice. He then began to write some of his works. When he was 40 years old, the governor of Fars got the king, Shah Abbas, to request Mulla Sadra to return to public life. He went to Shiraz, not Isfahan, where he taught for the last 30 years of his life. Students came from as far as Tibet to study with him on one side, and Tangiers on the other side. Shiraz therefore became a major intellectual center. Mulla Sadra died in 1640 in Basra, in southern Iraq, while making his 7th pilgrimage on foot to Mecca. Can you imagine a philosopher of his rank walking to Mecca? Now, Mulla Sadra did not write as many titles as Ibn Sina, but he did produce about 45 books, about the same number as Sohrawardi. And these works have been classified into two types, as Mulla Sadra himself would have approved of: those dealing with the intellectual sciences, and those dealing with the transmitted religious sciences. But we should not separate these two categories completely from each other, since his philosophical, metaphysical works have a very important religious element in them. He constantly refers to the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet, as well as the sayings of the Shiite Imams. And his religious works, like Quranic commentaries and commentaries upon the Hadith, as well as sayings of the Imams, have a very strong philosophical, metaphysical element. So it's not that they're completely distinct from one another. Mulla Sadra wrote some of the greatest masterpieces of Quranic commentary in Islam, especially his commentary upon the light verse, which is about 200 pages long. His commentaries have now been put together in 7 volumes called El-Tafsir el-Kabir, the Great Commentary. It is not a commentary on the whole of the Quran, but several particularly important verses and chapters. And this is really the final and the most important encounter between the Quran and the Islamic philosophical tradition. No one before or after has produced so much work on the Quran of such depth as to be compared with the commentaries of Ibn Arabi, the great master of Sufi doctrine, regarding the deepest meanings of the Quran. Here Mulla Sadra accepts the thesis of the Sufis that to understand the Quran, one must have inner understanding. That is, you have to first of all go within yourself to be able to understand the inner dimension of the Quran. I will not discuss this methodology further here, but I should note that he also wrote commentaries on the Hadith of the Prophet, as well as the Shiite Imams. That concludes our initial discussion of Mulla Sadra. Next time, we'll turn to his most famous philosophical text, Al-Asfar al-Arba'a, which means the 4 journeys, and his grand synthesis of over 700 years of Islamic philosophical and theological thought.